County is the sound. Oh, Ohio's place. Fun all around. Yeah, yeah. Warren County, feel the beat. Every corner fun to meet. Oh, from the rivers to the trains. Dance all night, feel no pain. Yeah, yeah. City lights, small town nights. All together feel so right. Get too small, let's unite. Warren County, pure delight.
Hello.
So you are with Don, right, as Lieutenant Governor, as a Libertarian? Is
Yeah.
that
Yep.
correct? So, just I guess a little bit. Tell me about yourself. Where are you from? Who you are, and how you got involved.
Yeah. You don't hear my son in the background too much, do you? Hopefully.
No,
It's me.
no,
Good. Perfect.
no.
Because I have a 2-year-old myself as we're talking, and he's got some pipes on. But
I get it.
um, well, no. I'm from Lebanon, so I'm actually right in Warren County with you guys. I've lived here for probably 4 years now, and I grew up in Coleraine,
Okay.
and so always been here in the Southwest. But my day job, I work as a financial advisor and do employee benefits for like small business owners. So I'm really ingrained in that small business community. And as I mentioned, I married my high school sweetheart. We got a 4-year-old, and 2-year-old, and a girl and a boy.
Okay.
And uh, my son is again, apologies to any listeners or to you for if you hear him in the background because he just woke up from a nap. Um, but yeah, we've really enjoyed this experience and to the betterment or the detriment to my wife's view of me. We have our hands in so many different things that I also run a nonprofit with my sister to hand out coats to the homeless, and we also do construction side business with my brother, and so we probably have like 3 or 4 main businesses that we're running constantly. Unfortunately and fortunately, I have like an IV of caffeine in my arm most days. So
I get that. I get that. So have you always been a libertarian, or have you always
yeah,
been independent, or what? What?
I kind of stumbled into it. Because when I was in college, I went to UC, and it was I kept hearing about like what libertarianism is, and I was very into as an independent at that time. I grew up more Republican than anything else, and
Well, you're Warren County, so
I grew up
that's
in
it.
Hamilton County though, so I was
Okay,
like,
but
oh.
yeah,
Um, but no, I grew up more conservative, and the thing about it was that I found myself more socially liberal and fiscally conservative. And so when I started talking to people in college, I was like, I don't think there's a political affiliation to that. And they're like, welcome to the Libertarian Party. And so I joined. I joined the Young Americans for Liberty and all of the Libertarian Club chapters down at UC. And then it kind of life is what happens, of course, when you make other plans. And so it fell by the wayside. And then a couple years ago during COVID, I was like, I really want to get involved. I'm not really liking a lot of this overreach and authoritarianism that I'm hearing. And so I reached out to the Warren County chapter of the Libertarian Party and started going to their meetings, and then started volunteering for things. And as you probably can attest, and anyone who's ever been in any organization who starts volunteering for things, you get voluntold to do more things. And so I ended up running I'm the chair of Warren County, and then I was the field development director for Ohio for the Libertarian Party, and then moved my way up to the vice chair, so second in command of all of Ohio. And it's been very eye-opening on just how politics works. And when Don and I decided we wanted to run together, I resigned because I didn't want the conflict of interest. And Don and I are now, of course, running the governor and lieutenant governor campaign. So it's been a lot, but it's who better than us, to try to make a change.
Well, growing up, you always hear really in school and everything, it's always Republican and Democrat, Republican and Democrat. You still hear that all the time in the news, the R's and the D's, the R's and the D's. Tell me about the Libertarian Party. What does it stand for? What is your philosophy, your platform?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I could kind of boil it into a couple things. But I think if I said it more simply, it's just consent. The fact that nobody consents to increasing taxes, right? Nobody consents to a lot of regulations in their business. Nobody, and I want the government out of, our bedrooms as much as I want them out of my business. And so from that standpoint, it's really that component of just we want to have consent in all that we're doing and kind of go back to the individual liberty component. And to kind of take that a step further, really what we've seen in conversations, and one of the reasons, and this is going to be kind of a telltale to some of our further conversation, is that most people are like, I don't really identify with everything on the right and everything on the left. It's not all or nothing, And so when we look at what the libertarian ideology is, because it's so much of like that individual freedom component, I'm more socially liberal, fiscally conservative, but we're all united under that premise of liberty. If you've ever said, hey, I don't trust the government, which 90% of people are, especially in this day and age of, Wexner and Epstein and all this stuff, like, um, if anyone's saying, hey, I feel like there's toxicity within the government, welcome to the Libertarian Party. I think that's just the benchmark for what we are is just small government down to like breed as much rights back to the individual and stop the authoritarian overreach.
Okay. So, as you say that, do you think, I mean, I know a lot of people are frustrated. Do you see your party growing more in numbers, um, as people are saying this is craziness with what how our two parties seem to be dividing us as a country versus bringing us together? Um,
Yeah, no,
do
it's
you?
a phenomenal question. Yeah, we kind of have a couple things that identify well with our ideology just within Ohio. And so you kind of see we had the marijuana amendment that was shot down a couple weeks ago. Then you have Ohio equal rights pushing strengthening marriage equality laws, which identify well with what we're talking about. And then the third other amendment is the abolish property tax amendment that, again, because we're so fiscally conservative, we're in support of also. So you kind of have this like political making for what we're doing. But the flip side is too is that over the last couple years, Ohio, we've had a struggle in trying to find breath, so to speak. And so what we were able to do, and this is a huge turnout to Michael Sweeney, who is the chair of Ohio, and then some of the efforts that I've done and some of the efforts of the other leadership is we've done so many phone calls and emails and events and all of this stuff where we're starting to garner a lot more of like the grassroots activism side where people are hearing more about us. And I think that's really been the key is we've focused and we've had an issue on the marketing side because our tent is so large and the ideology is just so my rights end where your rights begin that most people typically align themselves with that idea. And when you have voter turnout at historic lows and over 72% of the population either identify themselves as politically homeless, where they don't identify with the right or the left, or they identify as moderates within their own party and feeling vilified by the extremism within both parties. Um, to have such a moderate option in what we do and such a common sense kind of rhetoric. Like it's interesting because like you hear populism and you hear all these ideas of like, and I'm not going to throw shade at anybody in particular, but like the term populism has been hijacked and coerced in recent years by billionaires and elites and everything like that. And it's just interesting because as we continue to build this movement in Ohio and with libertarianism, it is true populism because we are for the individual. And it all stems and starts from just that grassroots activism of, hey, we advocate for the community because we're in these communities. Like I'm going to Docs here in a couple hours in Lebanon for a libertarian event, and I go there once a month. I'm a regular. They know what they're going to have a beer for me as soon as I walk in. And I'm like, well, that's my town. And it's a matter of just being out in your community and trying to build that community.
Right. That's that's I agree with you. It's important to know your people that you're elected to serve. I mean, um, so often I think people get into a political place and they feel like they need to be served versus serving the people, and that could be very dangerous. So I sent you a list of some questions and let me pull them up. Let's see. We already went over that one, define libertarianism. See, well, maybe a little bit difference between you and the Republican Party and you and the Democrat Party. Is there something you could really say that's really different there that let's go
Yeah.
like what's different between you and the Republican Party? Um,
So again, when we talk about like where we politically align, we line more on the Republican Party when it comes to like gun rights and deregulating the economic side of things with like small business owners. And so we're very much on that like fiscal conservatism side where it's like, hey, we want as little regulation as possible because the free market should be really in charge of how things are operating. And so that's really one of the big components that we champion on the right. And when you look at the left, um, again, we're in favor of like gay marriage and ending qualified immunity, and we're ardently outspoken. And this might, be the political side like that you can caption is that we're very ingrained in like the anti-ICE, anti-authoritarianism community too. And so like that's where we're like aligning more on the left side, is that we on the right, again, it goes back. The old joke within the Libertarian Party is that we want um, a gay man shooting his guns and running his cupcake shop to be left alone from the government, and so while he's smoking a joint. So it's like you look at all that stuff, and it's just um, where the Republican Party has consistently touted themselves as like, hey, we really want small government. Their actions have spoke otherwise. And when you look at the Democrats, they have always been in favor of larger government, and so that's where we politically uh, delineate ourselves. Is that instead of saying, "Hey, I want small government or big government," ideally it's how can we reduce the size of government overall, and government really should. Not to say like the anarchist type idea of saying get rid of government entirely, but a lot of the stuff is how do you get the community to facilitate these services and like in a perfect world as an example. um, I talk a lot with small business hubs like chambers of commerce and incubators and all of that, and in my world where I'm talking with these groups is how do you build out collaborative endeavors and nonprofit collaboratives as an example to help mitigate some of the mental health issues that are going on and to help stem away from homelessness. And so I would rather see that versus the government just pumping funding into a community to try to mitigate it. Because oftentimes when you see this side with the government, you just end up seeing a lot of the bureaucratic delays and it's not really fixing the issue. It's more just, hey, we feel good about ourselves because we're spending a lot of money to fix it. And it's like, cool, well, if you actually went back to the community and to the businesses in that community, right? Like as someone who's in a small community myself, if I see a homeless person, or if my school, Lebanon City Schools, needs a new billboard or something like that, like something like a new baseball stadium, I'll probably give money to that. But I just don't want to be told that I need to give money to that. You know what I mean? It should be going back to that lesson in consent of I want to be in control of where my money, where my time, and where my resources are going. And when you look at the right and the left, it's, your dad on the right saying, hey, this is what we need to do. And then your mom on the left, who's leading more with compassion, is saying, like, hey, I'm going to take that money and give it over here. So it's just more of like hands off is really the ideology behind the libertarian movement. Is just how do you get government to scale back on a lot of the programs that they've created so that you can really move more towards like voluntarism and again the more how do you mobilize communities, and that's also one of the reasons why so much of what we do falls back on like grassroots activism. And like you'll see a lot of libertarians who work in nonprofits. You'll see a lot of libertarians who go to like protests and meetups and stuff like that. And we don't often advocate for ourselves because we like to say that we're herding cats and that we're mostly are made up of introverts. And so saying that, like, they won't tell you they're libertarian, but again, most of the time, those are the types of people who are actually out going and trying to do things to make a difference as opposed to trying to politicize or philosophize and debate about like, oh, how do you make the difference? It's more of like, okay, well, how are we actually trying to make the difference?
Okay. Um, th this
I
is just
apologize
something
for
from
long-winded.
no, no. This is just something which I hear you saying, and like you said, like in a perfect world. Um, and I didn't send you this question, but as you were talking, how do you handle the lawsuits? It seems like that's what, like you have the gay couple that wants to get married, and then you have the cupcake maker who doesn't believe in that type of marriage, so they don't want to make the cupcakes. And yet the gay couple then has a right to sue the cupcake maker. And, it's like instead of letting people just work it out and say, go find another cupcake maker who's very happy to make you cupcakes, but they take it to court, and ruin that small business because they wouldn't make them cup. How do you handle, as a libertarian, how would you handle a situation like that? I mean, because it's like you said, where my liberties end or my rights end, yours begin. I mean, how do we stop that type of thing? It's
I honestly, that's a fair question, and you kind of already answered the question. Is that if a gay couple comes in and tries to buy cupcakes, and the person's like, "Hey, we don't serve that," then more than likely either they're going to lose clients because of that, they're going to be publicly shamed because of that, or they'll get sued because of that, and that company's going to go under. But the next cupcake owner, right, is probably not, regardless of what they ideologically align with, they're probably going to say, yeah, no, I'll serve this gay couple. And so it's, which is it's a hard lesson to kind of, or a hard thing because it is something that is not, it, for me to be able to say like, hey, sorry, small business owner who discriminated, you're out of business. It's also something where it's like, hey, there's a reason why you're starting to see so much like social corporate responsibility, and in a day and age where information is plentiful and everyone's looking into companies that like the doings and the dealings of these companies, it actually it leans perfectly into the libertarian perspective. Like one of the things we're talking a lot about is and this is actually a more poignant example is the Les Wexner connection. There's a lot of debates going on in Columbus right now because of Wexner being on all of OSU's campus. And so what Don and I have actually came out and said recently is stop buying stuff from OSU. Like stop, like until they start making changes, you're voting with your dollars. And that's really the way you impact change, is that if I'm going to continue to support these people who are propping up an institution that is toxic, right? The way you get rid of that is not always necessarily there's some strength behind like going out and protesting and some of these types of events, but the way you actually change the institution is by stopping enabling the institution, which is often the monetary impact that we're talking about. And so if I stop going to the cupcake shop owner and they go under, or if I stop buying swag from OSU's campus, or if I stop going to Victoria's Secret to on the Epstein connection, right? Like when you look at that stuff and they start feeling that pain of lost money and lost revenue, that's the quickest way that elites and the powerful will end up stopping what they're doing and try to make a change because that economic incentive is no longer there, and so like so saying that the small business owner, I'm not saying they deserve necessarily to go out of business. Everyone's got their own prerogative and their own opinion, but at the end of the day, the market's going to incentivize the cupcake owner that's not bigoted and discriminatory as opposed to the one that is.
So I just know there's so much ideology out there that runs people's lives that it's gonna, because of so many lawsuits, that's where our government's always tends to go, with the lawsuits. And it it'll be interesting because I agree with a lot of stuff that you're saying. I don't know how it can be done. I just don't know how it can be done, but we'll
Well,
see.
you, I'm glad you say that because one of the things that we talk a lot about right now is kind of a couple things. The first thing is, and I can't necessarily affect this if I got the lieutenant governor or the governorship, um, but ending and repealing Citizens United is one big step towards doing that. And affecting that kind of change because, of course, with Citizens United, businesses have the ability to uh, control things because they're able to lobby and they have their First Amendment right. Um, and so with that, as you they can that's kind of where we started to move towards like this plutocracy, or not necessarily the plutocracy where businesses are in charge of the government at that point. And so if you start to scale back on that, corporations being able to lobby and corporations being able to come in and uh, tell politicians legally to vote a certain way, you're starting to eliminate some of that corporate influence. But the second other component is, and this actually touches what one of your other questions that I know you were going to ask, is the property tax conversation.
Yeah, that's a
Is
big one.
we when we've done a lot of research into this with the property tax, it's the and there's a lot to unpack there, but one of the things that we've found is that though it's said that it's supposed to go towards public schooling, it's actually gone into this general education account. And that general education account has really been, there's not a lot of transparency around it, but from what I'm finding is it's kind of operating like the way Social Security is, which is a stop loss, where it's kind of covering the gaps in other parts of our budget. And so when you address the budget conversation and you start to address like where our money's actually going from an Ohio perspective, um, it makes it so that you don't need as much revenue coming in. And there's other sources to kind of mitigate some of those losses that we can talk about. But want to kind of tie it back to what we're talking about on this like small business conversation and like the empowering the small business and kind of getting the government more out. The issue that you find is that we have so much of our Ohio budget going towards corporate subsidies for and tax abatements for these like large enterprise companies across the state, which have kind of created this monopoly. And this goes back to when you look at the HB6 scandal with First Energy and Duke. You have this with AT&T. You have this with a lot of insurance companies here in Ohio. And when you look at this, they've been able to monopolize those verticals and those industries because they've been propped up by the government. And so once you start to address that conversation of eliminate some of those corporate subsidies, not only does that go back and make it so that the mom and pop shops aren't being ran out of business, which is something we've been finding a lot recently in our conversations across Ohio. Is I was in Akron or Athens 3 weeks ago, and there's a Republican Republican county commissioner candidate in Athens that was running, who runs uh, a diner attached to a convenience store, and they had like an Applebee's come out, and then they had a Dollar General come out. So these two large franchises, and they ended up having to shut their convenience side. And so, because of these large corporations that got a tax abatement to be in Athens. And so, when you start to eliminate some of those corporate or governmental backed monopolies that have been propped up by corporate subsidies, and you eliminate that out of our budget, not only does that go right back into the general education fund, but you're also doing it in a way where I don't need as much money to subsidize that general education fund because I'm not spending as much. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And tax abatements are very interesting. Our whole tax system is totally messed up. It's just good luck. No, let's go to some next questions. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, no, I know. It's I don't. There's oftentimes every day I ask myself, "Am I doing the right thing by doing this?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's yeah." It's just you're gonna have a lot more headaches than you probably would have
and
expected.
I used to be an elected official. I served for 10 years as a township trustee. So I know, and thank you for running. I think anybody that runs because there's a big mess that has been created by our forefathers who I don't think meant to create this mess, but people just need to fix something right away and it sounds good. And so they plop this down and it's like when you look at it, it's like, what were they thinking? It's like because somebody else comes around and manipulates it to work for the way they need it to work, and then all of a sudden you're like, this isn't working. Uh,
I'm really glad you say that because I've been having a lot of conversations kind of around that topic because as a libertarian, we're in that like challenger party situations. And so everyone's like, oh, I don't want to throw away my vote. And I'm like, I get that. Which, number one, we end up pulling votes from people who aren't historically voting anyway. So, like, there's not like that spoiler situation, at least in Ohio, when you look at it historically. But saying that, like, the thing that I've found kind of as that like political outsider conversation is there's some truth in what we're able to say because we're like, we're running a full campaign. I'm going to point this out, and I hope to win. But kind of walking in and being like, hey, the realistic side is we're just trying to make a change, not necessarily win, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing so much out in the community. Um, but that allows me this ability to kind of come out and say like, hey, because I don't really care if I win, and I'm really just trying to affect change. There's a conversation of what the long term should be. And so there's been a lot of conversations to your exact point of, people have been so prone, most politicians, and regardless of ideology, are prone to saying, hey, here's what I'm going to do a temporary fix that's going to win me votes. And it's great for the first 2 to 3 years. And then when you look at it over the long haul, they're not measuring the additional externalities that could arise because of some of those decisions. And so, like, it's easy for me to come, like, people to come out and say, like, cool, here's what I'm going to do to impact change. And here's the issues that we're going to fix and all of this stuff. And then when you measure that against a generation or two, you're like, man, these zoning laws were terrible, which is like one of the points that like, and so it's and so like, or even on like the data center conversation, um, which is another hot topic in Ohio, is it as a kind of a political outsider. I'm like, well, I see an economic benefit of data centers, but the hard part is ecologically, it's going to be terrible, not only for the farm owners, but also for just the environment in general. And so, like, the easy fix would be, hey, stop the data center, right? Which I would be in favor of. But then you're also, I've kind of wrestled this ideology between those two because it's like, well, it's also good for the economic side. Like Wilmington needs that kind of for the AWS contract. And so you're looking at a lot of other factors, which most people aren't typically looking at because they would rather politicize and say it in a one liner. And kind of being that outsider, I'm like, okay, well, the actual fix, and this is true both on the data center conversation and even on just like the wider environmental impact of things, is like the wider fix is you bake the externalities in the long run into people's accounting practices. If we change the accounting method and how we're bookkeeping, and we say, hey, because you polluted this river, the polluting the river is gonna cost you an extra $50 million this year on your taxes, right? For your accounting stuff, like that business is gonna be like, cool, I don't want to do that, or I'm gonna find a way to do this without polluting the river. And that's kind of a similar conversation on the data center stuff, because you're measuring stuff in longer generations than just my next election cycle, you know?
Right, right. The solar panels for their energy on top of the roofs. I mean, they don't have to take other people's land and they have these huge roofs. Why not just use solar power? So, um,
Exactly.
but all right, time left 3 minutes. So we are going to wrap this up quickly, but um, do you think, let's see what other questions do you think Ohio's ready to do you think Ohioans are ready for party change?
I do. And it goes back to that politically homeless comment that I said, that in Ohio, again, 49% are independents and 72% are moderate. If you include that politically homeless comment and the moderates, it's 72% of the population. And so, if the way you correct that bad voter turnout is by actually talking about other options as opposed to just saying, hey, here's pick your poison, right? Why not try to be the antidote? And that's to answer another question, just for the sake of brevity, is the fact that like that's actually why we decided to run, is to say, hey, I got tired of picking the poison. I didn't really like the candidates that were coming up. And so why pick your poison when you can try to be the antidote and be the change that you wanted to see? And so that's kind of what mobilized Don to step up, and consequently me as well.
So that's great. Well, the Warren County Post is here for you guys to send me your materials, your stories, whatever, whenever you have a press release. I'm here to basically to inform the readers, our county residents, what's out there, what their options are. Um, because a lot of people don't know, they just a lot of times go by a name that they've heard before, or they just go buy a party ticket because that's, well, I guess I lean mostly Republican or I lean mostly Democrat, so I got to vote for these people, because they don't know, because it's really hard to find information. And so I think it would be good for you guys to keep your information out there so people know there's other choices, which, because most of us only think Republican or Democrat most of the time. So, and when you say a different name, they're like, huh? So, no, and really, when I got your email, like I said, I read it the first couple times. All of a sudden, I read, wait, Don Kissick for government. Wait, who is this? And it's like, and then I had to go do research, and then I said, oh my gosh, there's a libertarian running for governor. I had no idea, and so a lot of times people don't take time to research, and so you kind of have to give everything to them, on a plate so they could see it, and so that's what the post is all about, is so people can just read it and see what it's about and make decisions that I guess, for their values and their ideology that they think is best. But I do thank you so much for running. I really do. I know it's hard. I know it's very stressful, on the family. Um, so my prayers are with you guys, with all of everybody that's running, because I do admire anybody that steps up and decides they want to run, because having been there and going through that myself, I know how much it takes, and it's hard.